Under the pale Montana sun, Main Street lay still, the kind of stillness that only small towns know, where time doesn't stop, it simply drifts. The wind carried a bite that morning, slicing through the last breaths of winter. And somewhere between the hum of a coffee shop and the clang of a flagpole, an old man walked. His name was Henry Cole, 85 years old, 3 deployments, 2 commendations, one body that no longer kept up with the world around him. He wasn't anyone most people noticed, just another slow-moving figure in a town too busy pretending it was still alive. He wore the same olive jacket every day, army issue, faded but clean, patched in both elbows, and still carrying the faint smell of machine oil and winter rain. On his chest, the threadbare outline of a name tag that once read H. Cole. In his hand was a small brown paper bag, a loaf of bread, a pack of cough drops, and a postcard he meant to send to his grandson, Cadet Cole, West Point class of '28. He stepped carefully, cane tapping the pavement like a metronome. Across the street, outside a bar called the Iron Horse, a group of bikers had gathered, chrome glinting, voices loud, laughter sharp enough to cut glass. Henry didn't pay them any mind, noise didn't bother him. He'd heard worse things in jungles where silence used to mean danger. Then it happened, a small, simple thing. As he passed the row of motorcycles, the cuff of his coat brushed a handlebar, just a touch. The bike rocked slightly but didn't fall. Henry stopped immediately. He turned, raised his hand. "Didn't mean to, son," he said softly, offering a small, apologetic smile. But to the man leaning against the bar rail, a tall, broad-shouldered biker with mirrored sunglasses, apologies didn't matter. Troy Lancaster wasn't used to being looked at by old men. He lived in a world where respect came loud, not gentle, and to him that soft smile looked like mockery. Without a word, he stepped forward. A sound cracked across the street, one loud, open-handed slap. Henry's body folded, slow and quiet. His cane hit the ground first. Then he followed, knees scraping the concrete, hands still gripping the paper bag as it tore apart. The loaf of bread rolled into the gutter, soaking up dust and oil. No one moved, not a voice, not a step. A dozen eyes watched from the bar, from the diner across the street, from car windows idling in the light. Phones stayed in pockets. Henry didn't cry out, didn't look up. He just sat there, breathing through the weight of humiliation. He gathered what was left of his bread, brushed it gently with the sleeve of his jacket, and placed it back in the torn bag. A waitress peeked out the diner window, then turned away. A father pulled his child closer and crossed the street. The biker's friends laughed, tapping bottles against the table like it was sport. Henry stood slowly, gripping the bus stop pole for balance. His body trembled not from pain, but from being seen and ignored. He looked down the road, quiet, endless, and for a brief second, it seemed like he wasn't sure he was still part of it. He limped to the bench, sat, and exhaled. The air was sharp enough to sting. He dabbed at the blood on his lip with the corner of his jacket, and then, almost mechanically, reached into his pocket and pulled out a small phone, plastic cracked, buttons worn smooth. One name on the screen, Falcon-1, emergency. He hesitated, then pressed it once. For 30 minutes, nothing happened. Cars came and went. The laughter from the bar went on. Henry sat upright, hands folded over his cane, eyes fixed on the horizon as if waiting for a bus no one else could see coming. Then the sound began, a faint, rhythmic hum, soft at first, like thunder still deciding whether to speak. The bartender stepped outside, frowned. "That's not a truck," he was right. The sky began to pulse. The wind picked up, scattering napkins and dust, and out of the tree line came the unmistakable shape of a Blackhawk helicopter, low and fast, its rotors shredding the silence. Glasses rattled, dogs barked. Every head on Main Street turned upward as the helicopter descended into the empty lot behind the row of shops. Moments later, a black SUV screeched to a stop in front of the bar. The doors opened in unison. Boots hit the pavement. Men in tactical gear stepped out, eyes sharp, movements precise, silent as a storm about to break. From the helicopter, one figure emerged. No helmet, no glasses, just presence. A man in his early 50s, shoulders straight, eyes carved from iron. He walked directly toward the bench. Henry looked up, their eyes met. "Dad," the voice was low, steady, carrying both steel and sorrow. "I got here as fast as I could." Henry gave the faintest smile, didn't say a word, didn't need to. The man knelt, brushed the dried blood from his father's cheek, and stood. The street had gone silent, even the wind held its breath. Behind him, the soldiers fanned out wordlessly, forming a semicircle across the street. No weapons raised, just presence, calm and absolute. Across from them, the bikers froze. Troy's hand twitched toward his cigarette, then dropped. The reflection of the soldiers glinted in his sunglasses. One patch stood out on the commander's arm, U.S. Army Special Operations. the name above it, Colonel Ryan Cole. And in that instant, Troy realized exactly whose face he'd struck. Colonel Cole's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Which one of you hit a veteran? The question hung in the air, sharp and cold. No one answered. Finally, Troy stepped forward half a pace. Man, it was just some old guy, he muttered. He bumped my ride. Ryan's jaw tightened. He took one slow step closer. That old man, he said quietly, rebuilt the engines that brought men home from war. That old guy carried brothers out of fire while you were still learning how to spell your own name. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The bikers shifted uneasily. Phones came up, recording. Ryan turned to one of his men, a subtle nod. The soldier stepped back, spoke into his radio. 2 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled up, no sirens, no lights. The officers got out. No one had to explain. They knew. The cuffs clicked shut around Troy's wrists, not in rage, but in quiet justice. The kind of justice that doesn't shout, it just restores balance. As the officers led him away, Troy's bravado dissolved. His friends looked down. The street was still, heavy with something it hadn't felt in years, shame. Ryan turned back to his father, kneeled again. You okay? Henry nodded faintly, voice gravel soft. I've had worse, he said. Then, after a pause, just not in front of so many who did nothing. The words landed harder than any command ever could. A woman with gray streaks in her hair stepped forward from the diner doorway. Her voice trembled. I should have helped you, I'm sorry. She offered a handkerchief. Henry took it gently, and something shifted. A young man near the coffee shop removed his baseball cap. A father lifted his son onto his shoulders. A boy, no older than 10, stood straight and saluted. One person, then another, and another. A small line formed along the sidewalk, old veterans, civilians, strangers, each standing at attention, each reclaiming a piece of their own silence. Ryan stepped back and let it happen. This moment wasn't his. It belonged to the man who never asked for thanks. Henry sat a little taller, not from pride but from relief, the kind that comes when the world finally remembers who you are. By nightfall, the video was everywhere. No music, no filters. Just raw footage, the slap, the silence, the Blackhawk, the salute. It spread not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. Respect the elder, one caption read. Honor never retires, said another. Within 24 hours, the local news called it the Ravenhill incident. By morning, national anchors were replaying the clip with trembling voices. They didn't just talk about what happened. They talked about who it happened to. Sergeant Henry Cole, Army mechanic, 3 Bronze Stars, 1 Purple Heart, a man invisible until that day. The bar issued a statement, an unfortunate incident not representative of our values, but everyone remembered the laughter. The silence, the way no one moved. A week later, Ravenhill's town green transformed. Rows of folding chairs, a stage draped in flags, the middle school chorus rehearsing the national anthem. Henry arrived in a wheelchair, not because he had to, but because someone offered, and this time he let them. The crowd rose as one, not out of obligation, but out of something deeper, a shared understanding that dignity, when restored, becomes contagious. The mayor spoke first, voice formal and safe, but the words that stayed came from Colonel Ryan Cole. He stepped up to the microphone, uniform crisp, eyes bright with pride and sorrow. He took a long pause before speaking. My father never raised his voice, he began. He didn't fight back, he didn't have to, because his life, every quiet act, every day of work no one saw spoke louder than fists ever could. He turned toward Henry. You taught me what strength looks like, and now the world knows it too. The applause rose slowly, then grew wave after wave until the air itself seemed to hum. 4 minutes, not for medals, not for revenge, but for every small act of service that had gone unseen, unthanked, unremembered. Henry lifted his hand, steady, deliberate in acknowledgement. That was all. It was enough. A few days later, Henry received a letter, no return address. The handwriting shaky, uneven. If you'll meet me, I'll listen. It was from Troy. He didn't owe the man anything. No one would have blamed him for throwing it away. But something about the letter, the smudged ink, the broken lines, reminded Henry of soldiers he'd known long ago. Men lost, angry, not beyond redemption. He asked his son to arrange a meeting. The room was small, a courthouse waiting room. No cameras, no uniforms. Troy sat hunched forward, eyes low, leather vest traded for a plain shirt. When Henry entered, the younger man stood awkwardly, unsure whether to salute, apologize, or hide. I didn't know who you were, Troy began. That's the problem, Henry said gently. You didn't care, Troy swallowed hard. My dad was in Vietnam, came back shattered. I grew up hating uniforms, thought they took him away. Henry nodded slowly. I knew men like him. They came home carrying ghosts. Some heavier than others. Silence filled the room, not tense but honest. Troy slid a folded paper across the table. Judge's orders or not, I'm starting therapy. Signed up to volunteer at the VA downtown. I don't know if it means anything, but I want to earn something back. Henry looked at the paper, then at the man across from him. He reached out, placed a weathered hand over Troy's. You won't earn it fast, he said softly. But every day you show up, you'll get closer. Troy nodded, tears breaking through the tough shell he'd built. That moment would never trend online, but it changed 2 lives in that small, quiet room. 6 months later, the corner of Broad Street and Ellison Avenue didn't look the same. Where there once had been silence, now stood a bronze plaque mounted on a polished stone wall. It read, "In honor of Sergeant Henry Cole, a quiet shield between us and chaos." Beneath it, a single line etched deeper than the rest. He never asked to be seen. He simply stood. People stopped there now. Not everyone, not every day, but enough. Students brought flowers on Veterans Day. A local artist painted Henry's silhouette into a mural of hometown heroes, and the city council renamed the park behind the bar Cole Park. Henry still visited every Thursday. Same boots, same jacket, same slow, steady walk, but now someone always waved first. A teenager on a skateboard would nod respectfully. A young recruit would stop to shake his hand. A father would point him out to his child, not as a legend, but as a lesson. And sometimes, parked near the curb, there'd be a van from the VA center. Behind the wheel, Troy Lancaster. No vest, no swagger, just quiet service. He spent his days driving veterans to appointments, carrying groceries, fixing things without being asked. He wore no uniform, but his actions started to fit like one. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Ryan returned to Ravenhill. He found his father sitting on the same bench outside the diner, watching the street that had once turned away. Ryan sat beside him. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, the son said, "You didn't just change one man, Dad. You changed this place." Henry smiled faintly, eyes on the flag fluttering across the park. "Maybe," he said. Or maybe they just remembered what mattered. The wind moved through the trees, gentle and constant. Somewhere in that sound, if you listened long enough, you could almost hear the echo of rotors, the faint hum of that day when silence broke and the world remembered. Some uniforms never come off. Some wars are fought quietly, without bullets, without medals, without applause. And sometimes victory doesn't look like triumph. It looks like forgiveness. Like an old man sitting on a bench finally seen. Like a town that learned respect doesn't come after pain, it begins with it. If you believe honor isn't about age or rank, if you believe dignity is something we owe to each other, then remember this story. Remember the day the town stood still, because one man refused to fall alone.